guys, I'm Sean from BlueHub, and today I'm going to be discussing the MRP with you. Now, MRP, or your material planning, is a very complex module in terms of setup and getting it to work the way you want it to work. So you will have to bear with me a little bit in this video just to kind of get through those complexities. It may also take a couple of watches of maybe rewinding and coming back to this point to really comprehend what I'm getting across here. But I will jump into it now and start explaining. So firstly, the MRP itself, how to run it, what it entails, and where to find it. So if we're on our dashboard, we'll find the MRP within our inventory, and then MRP here. If we then click into that, you'll see that we have a few options here. These are already existing MRP runs, and you'll see that they have a status of completed. Now when we create an MRP run, it will go from being a draft MRP run to an in-progress MRP run to a completed MRP run. Now the key differences here is that a draft MRP run we can still configure, as with most aspects of DIR, but once we start that MRP run, it's going to be in progress and we can no longer configure it. What we can do from there though is we can action any recommendations the MRP is giving us, and then once we're happy that we've actioned all of the recommendations we want to, we can then use the completed option to complete it, and then we can begin a new run. With the MRP, you can't begin a new run until your previous run is completed, so that's something to keep in mind. You can only do one of these runs at a time, so that will change how you kind of manage your procurement. Just to get into it then, if I press the plus icon here, we can begin a new MRP run, and we're given the following screen of details. I'll make my way from here left to right. So firstly, on our left, we're going to load demand with details. Now we're likely always going to want to click this because it's going to give us a breakdown of why we need certain items, whether it's because of sales orders, whether it's because of minimum stock levels, etc. So we'll want to click this so that we can get that breakdown. The only time you wouldn't want to click this is if you want it to load faster. If you are having issues with load times, not clicking this may help with those load times. We then have our planning period here. So this is going to work on our recommendations for any sales orders. So it's going to look at the required by date field for the most part. Any sales that are required within this next month, it's going to tell us to purchase our stock for. Any sales that are required within this next week, it's going to tell us to purchase our stock for. It's not going to affect our procure up to stock levels so much because that is irrelevant to dates. It's purely going to be on any demand we've got, it's going to look at demand based on this month. From here, we can then select a location if we want, so we only want to do this for a single location versus all our locations. For the sakes of these demos, I'm going to be using our MRP test, so we have MRP example here. And then we can also specify a particular customer, so when we're looking at demand, if we have a customer who has a lot of demand that isn't being fulfilled, we can specify to their level as well so we can make sure we can fulfill their orders. So that's going to be in terms of our general setup here. Next we have our supply settings, so this is going to be what it's actually telling us to purchase based on the options we press here essentially. So firstly we have procure up to stock level. So what DIR considers our stock level is our minimum before reorder plus our reorder quantity. So if we have a minimum before reorder of 6 and a reorder quantity of 12, it's going to tell us to order, we're going to want to have in stock 18. So if we already have 10 in stock, it's going to tell us to order 8. If we already have 12 in stock, it's going to tell us to order 6. So it's always going to procure up to that level. Now that does seem a little bit different to how you'd expect it to work. So if you don't get that or you're struggling to figure out your numbers, just rewatch that bit and try understand that again. I'll repeat it one more time. It's going to be your minimum before reorder plus your reorder quantity is your stock level. So if you have a minimum before reorder of 6 and a reorder quantity of 12, your stock level is going to be 18, which is going to be what it keeps in stock using this run. So that's one to keep in mind on how that works. We then have include overdue demand. So any demand that whether required by date is in the past, it's going to include that in what we're procuring for. So we're going to reorder our 18, plus we have a sale that was due last week and we needed free of an item for it. So now we're going to be ordering 21, for example. Here we can also include any draft or planned supply orders, so if we have any draft or planned purchase orders or production orders, and we want to take that into consideration that is planned, so we are going to be doing that in the future, we can tick this and we're not going to be double ordering essentially. We then have our bomb explosion, So if we do have BOMs, we are making use of BOMs, either assembly or production, and we want to be doing our purchasing for the BOMs as well as actually having our base demand of the BOM, and we want to also go look down into a lower level of what's required to actually make that BOM, we would tick the BOM explosion option here. Next we have include forecast demand. So this is going to allow us to import a forecast based on the template they have provided for us. So if I just quickly show you that CSV template to show you what we can actually upload here. It's very basic. It's just going to allow you to give certain products required by dates and a location where they're required in, allowing you to essentially say, I need this good, I need 100 of it by the end of the week, and it's going to take that into account as well, so you can kind of have some manual input on what you're ordering here. Obviously then if you're doing a big purchase from that same supplier, it's going to combine all of that together, so that's why you might want to include it in your MRP as opposed to doing it separately. For the sake of this demo, I'm just going to click our procure up to stock level option, and I'm going to ignore the rest for now. Next we have our demand source. So this is what we're going to base our demand off of. So if we want to look at, well, it's going to say we're going to be looking at sales demand. So what we need in order to fulfill our sales, whether we want to look at authorized, not authorized, or all. So in this example, I'm just going to look at all. You typically want to look at authorized. I don't know why you would ever want to look at just not authorized. I presume if you're planning ahead, so when you authorize it, you already have a stock there. That was when you might tick that box. And then you can also look at any transfers that are in progress. So if you're transferring from another warehouse to our current warehouse, or you're looking to transfer goods out of this warehouse into a separate warehouse, we can look at what demand is required there in order to actually fulfill our overall goods. On our right here, we just have some statuses that we can set anything created by this MRP run to be. So when we actually tick to say we want to create a transfer order based on our MRP run, we can have it be draft or ordered. We can have our production orders be draft or planned. We can have our assembly orders be draft or authorized. Our purchase orders can be draft or ordered. And then we can have, well, no, just to go back to these for a second. So that's just going to allow you to say basically whether you need that second layer of approval or you're happy with what the MRP run is producing. So it can just immediately be authorized essentially. While you're first getting used to the MRP run, you may want to have the layer of actually authorizing these in there, just so that you can kind of actually accept it, and you're not, familiar with the numbers yet, so you might want to double check everything. That's fine. And then when you get more used to the MRP, you can then start using the actual ordered functionality there to skip that layer. Our bottom and final option here is selecting our where we're going to be making our purchases from, whether that be the supplier with the lowest price, the supplier with the lowest lead time, or our most recent supplier. Or we can use the supplier set up by our supply rule. Now, if you don't know what supply rules are, I'm going to be getting into that in a second. But just for now, that is one of our options. Now that we've looked at all of that, I'm just going to run our report here. This is giving me an error, a very important error in the way the system is currently set up and why we can't actually do an MRP run currently. So if I jump into this general settings, just so you can tell it wasn't a mistake, you see I had it open there, ready to go. And within here we have what we call the minimum before reorder set for rule here. Now what this dictates is whether our minimum before reorder values against our products or our stock levels, if we combine the two of them together, are for individual locations or whether they are for the whole system as a whole. Now obviously the easier way to do this in terms of getting the data is doing it for a system as a whole, but if you are wanting to use the MRP run, you're going to need these minimum before reorders for each specific location. Now the reason that is because we'll do transfers between different locations and purchase orders unique to each location. So we will need unique values for each of those locations on the products you want to be reordering. So you'll need to come into here and change this and possibly take a relook at the way you're currently managing your minimum before reorder against your products in order to make that work. Just to give you an example of this, if I jump into a product here, you'll see that we have a minimum before reorder and a reorder quantity on our right side of our screen here, and currently both of those are set to 0. That means our rule across all of our locations currently is that we're not going to be reordering this product. It's not going to be on our reports. However, since we just changed that rule to be location specific, we're not going to be looking at that, and instead we are going to be looking at our reorder levels here, where we can see that we are only going to be reordering 12 of this good for the location MRP example, and we're not going to be reordering it anywhere else, just for this individual location. So this is something that you will need to keep in mind, is that for these rules you will need unique parameters for each location. You can import these rules in bulk using the let me just open it up, the reorder location import, and doing so you could just default all of your locations to be the same as your main location in terms of reorder levels, but that's up to you on how you want to actually handle that. So it should be in here somewhere, stock reorder locations here, and you'll see here that the field specification is quite easy. We just need an SKU, a location, and then you'll have your minimum before reorder and your reorder quantity here, and obviously we'll add these two together to get our stock level. Hope that was comprehensible and understandable. Obviously I'm jumping through these things a lot because there is a lot to cover, but once again, please use the rewind feature to go back and rewatch anything I've said if you're not understanding it. From here we go back to our MRP run now that this rule has been changed, providing I have saved it, and then we should be able to run the actual run now. Now this can take a while. It actually sometimes tells you to go away and do something else while it's loading because it takes so long, and sometimes it can take much less time. Since I'm only doing it in our one location here, it's not taking that long, and so we can see here that it's actually ran quite quickly. Now this is our MRP run once it's actually been run and what it provides us with. Across the top here we have a couple of tabs. Starting off with our demand, it's going to look at any demand that is being given for an individual location. So here we can see that we have a 25 demand for our location here. We then have our suggested supply orders based on this demand, and currently this is empty, and I will tell you why that is in a second. We then have the results, so any suggested supply orders, if we actually confirm that we want to process them, it will then become a result, which I will show you in briefly in a little bit. And then we have any errors, which is going to tell us any information we're missing on against our items, which we should have in order for the run to function at its best. And then finally we have our activity log, so we can see who's been processing it and what they've been up to. So if we go back to our demand now, and we look across all of our items here, we'll see that we have several items that have got a demand against them. I'm going to use the filtering options to just look at our individual product, which is going to be our paint e.g. MISC 1. So I'm just going to copy that SKU. We can come into here, we can either search it at the top, so we can see that that's limited just to our paint, or if we didn't want to do that, we could come across here and we could go on the SKU and add in a filter of our SKU here. Similar to most of our reports in DIR. Hasn't worked. Let me just try that one more time. Oh, I need to untick the rest of them first, I believe. There we are. So now we have our one item that we are going to be looking at here, and it's going to be our paint, e.g. MISC, and as you can see we have an independent demand of 12. Now if we go back to our products here, and we go back to our reorder levels, we'll see where that comes from. That's going to be our 4 plus our 8. So if I was to now change this to, let's say, 8 and 8, and then save, and we was then to come back into our MRP run, and we was to recalculate it using the recalculate button here. I'll pause while this happens because once again this can take a second, but I'll show you how that's now affected our levels. Okay, now I'm back. You can now see that we have an independent demand of 16 instead of our 12 because we've now got 8 and 8. So that's where it's pulling that number from. If we then also had a sales demand on top of that, where we are requiring 4 for a sale, it's going to add that into that demand, and it's going to mean we need 20. Our dependent demand over here is purely for bombs. So if this was had a bill of materials against it that took components, those components would then have a dependent demand of whatever it takes to build this item times 16. If I then click into our demand, we can then get a breakdown of where this demand is actually coming from. So we can see that it's for our stock level. On this day, we're going to require 16. From there, we can then go into our suggested supply orders, and once again, as I said before, currently, this isn't working. Now, this is the most common issue with the MRP and why no one really understands how it works, and that is because we need our supply rules set up on the back end for the location in order for it to work. Now, when I say for the location, this means for any locations that you actually want to have a purchase order appear on here for, you're going to need to set up a separate supply rule. So I'm going to go in and do it for our current location, which is our MRP example. If you haven't seen my locations video already, I recommend watching it, but essentially all I've done so far is I've gone to reference books, locations, and then we have our MRP example, which is one of our many locations in this account. From here, we then have our tabs on the left side, and I'm just going to select supply rules, at which point we can create a new supply rule. Now, the reason nothing is currently appearing in our MRP at all is because we don't have any supply rules against this location, so the system doesn't know how to handle it. So we will then go in and we will add a supply rule, which will then tell the system what it needs to do in order to meet its demand. So if I just name this supply rule, like so, within here we can then set up some parameters on what the system is going to recommend we do based on if we don't have stock currently. So first off here, we can select whether we want this rule to be used for all of our products in the location or just certain products. So here we can specify certain products we want it to use for. So if, for example, we want to purchase some products but produce some others, we might filter on category and filter on purchased products versus production products, for example. For my scenario here, I'm just going to select all products. The select products feature isn't really used often, but I think that's just because a lot of people have a lack of understanding when it comes to the MRP and its full capability. But you could break down specific rules for specific product groups if you wanted to. Now that we've done that, we have our in response to demand plan action. Now what this is saying is, if we have a demand for our item, whether that be to meet our minimum stock levels, to make a sale, to transfer to another location, any kind of demand means we need this product. Based on that, what we're going to do is, we have that demand, we're going to purchase goods. We have that demand, we're going to transfer goods. We have that demand, we're going to produce goods. These are our different options available to us on how we can bring the goods in to meet that demand. So produce obviously is just going to be, if you're using production or assembly, you can have it so that you're going to start building goods in order to meet your demand if there is a bill of materials available. If there isn't a bill of materials available, this rule will do nothing. If there is, it's going to produce until our percentage of capacity available is less than whatever percentage you'd like here. So if you still want 50% of your goods available, you could put in a 50% here, and then it would stop at that point. You can also specify where you want this production to begin. So if you want to have the goods in this location, but you want to produce them elsewhere, you can specify where you're actually going to want to produce those goods. Once we have this in here, I'm just going to leave that there. We can then add a second rule in. So if we couldn't actually produce our goods, we still haven't met our demand after producing our goods, we're then going to purchase our goods. Well, actually, no, we're going to transfer our goods from, once again, main warehouse. Let me just find that real quick. And we're going to take either all available, so that's all of the stock that we have there, until we reach our minimum before reorder, or until we reach our stock level. Now, obviously, our minimum before reorder is that value we supply. That's against all of our data. Our stock level, once again, is our minimum before reorder plus our reorder quantity, which is going to be our stock level. So you can pick between these based on how much stock you want remaining after actually taking action here. And then finally, we can do this in order to fulfill our demand quantity, whether that be the full demand quantity only or partial demand quantity. So this means it's only going to recommend you do something if you can meet the full demand, but if you want it to give you a partial transfer for what you have available and not just only if you have the full amount, you can do partial demand quantity. Now what that's useful for is if you say you need 20 goods in this location and you have 10 in another location. If you don't want to just transfer the 10 and instead you want to purchase, you do total demand quantity only, followed by a purchasing rule. If you wanted to transfer the 20 that you have available, you're going to do, or the 10 you have available, and then you do purchasing anyway, you do the partial demand so that you transfer the not the full order. And you can see how these rules kind of start to combine and compound, and they can become unique very quickly to your scenario. And that's why I can't, well, it's very case by case on how we recommend these. So all I can really do is give you a brief overlook on how they work. If I now delete out both of these lines, all we need for our location right now is we want to purchase our product. So I'm just going to do a purchase from supplier with the lowest lead time, for example. So when we were setting up our MRP run, you'll remember that we had the options for who we wanted to purchase from, and I selected the one against the supply rule. So that means it's going to use whatever option we pick here. And then finally, if our demand is still not met after whatever we've put above, we can then either do nothing, we can produce, transfer, or purchase. So in this instance, I'm just going to do nothing for a final plan action, and then we can save that as our supply rule. Providing that our product has a supplier against it, which I don't think mine does, so we can just double check that quickly. Okay, it does. We can go back to our MRP run, and we can press the recalculate button now that we have some supply rules in place, and we should be recommended some purchase orders. Since we've set up our supply rule, that's going to mean we are going to purchase our goods. So you'll see here, we now have purchases for all of our different products relative to us. From here, I'm going to filter out all of the products we don't want to see once again. So if we come in here, we can select a specific product, we can search our product, and we can enter it there. And we can then apply that so we can only see the purchase that's relative to our product. If we had multiple items that was coming from the same supplier, they would all appear here. However, in this case, since we only have the one item that's coming from that supplier, we only have one item populating here. On the right side here, we can see that we have our supplier, supplied from / buy from here on the right. So it's trying to buy from Bluehub Suitability, brackets customer, so it shouldn't be buying it from them, but I guess it is. If we go back to our product screen now, we'll see that we have our Bluehub Suitability customer has the lowest price other than 0, which I'm not sure why that might not be taken into account since it is 0. So I'm presuming it's going to the next lowest, which is 1 here, and that's why it's then purchasing from them. I can't remember which rule I picked, but if our lead time was lower here, that might also be the reason it's using them as its purchasing supplier. Since it's doing that, that's what's telling it to pick this supplier, but we can always use the drop down here to overwrite it. So if we wanted to, we could select any other supplier from our list now and then change it for the entire purchase order. If we're happy with this purchase order, we can now actually complete it, or if we want to, we can split this purchase order up into multiple purchase orders for ourselves. So for example, I can do 2 orders of 6 instead of 1 order of 12, like so. So now we have, I probably should have only split that once, but we now have multiple runs where we're going to have 6 per run rather than a overall 12. I'm not sure why that one's 4, but yeah. So we then have our purchase orders, you can then tick on those, and we can press confirm to then actually purchase these orders. That's then going to take it to our results page, where we then have our purchase order that is now populated, that we can then click into because it now exists within the system, but it can always be tracked from this screen. So we'll see we have our link here, which we can then open up, and in which we can find the purchase order that it's created for us based on the information provided. We're then purchasing our 6 from our supplier for our location provided here. And that's kind of the full MRP run end to end. We can then check in our activity log, and once we're happy that we've done all of the suggested supply orders we want to, we can then press complete and complete out the run. I hope this video was helpful in getting a grasp around how the MRP run works and what actually goes into setting it up. Obviously, once again, it is quite complex, so you may need to view this video a couple of times or rewatch certain parts of it. Please do also leave any comments on any questions you have below. This is quite a new feature, and we're always looking into getting more new questions on it and having to look into them. So if there is anything you're confused on, please let us know and we can either look into it or we've already tested it and we'll have an answer for you. That'll be all from me. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts, and I will speak to you next time. Bye.